So for all of you who are here, thank you for being here. I just wanted to go live today. Just wanted to take some questions. I do have some questions from the Project 24 community that I want to start with, but I'm going to be taking questions from the chat as well. So thank you, everybody. Okay, here we are. My first question comes from Project 24 community and asking for a detailed example of how to battleship an old post that's ranking between 4 and 10. So when we say battleship, just for some background here, we have our battleship method. We have a YouTube video about it. We're talking about taking content that's at least a year old and what are we going to do to improve it? So if we're ranking between 4 and 10, we actually have some pretty good potential to boost the traffic substantially. Articles ranking number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 get substantially less clicks than those ranking number 1, and then 2, and then 3. It drops off, obviously. So what are we going to do? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go look at who is ranking number 1, 2, and 3 and try to figure out why. Now, every article is potentially going to rank for multiple different search queries. So we're talking about the primary search query. I'm going to go see who's ranking, why they're ranking. And this really is kind of independent of how long the article is. What is the level of resource? I may use this example again later with another question that's asked, but I was just looking at an article yesterday that one of our writers wrote a while back. It's not actually published yet for one of our sites, turnupthepressure.com. And as I looked through the article, I was like, yeah, this is on par with the article that's currently ranking number 1, but it's insufficient. The person who reads this article still needs to do more research before they can do the thing the article is teaching them how to do. That's not good enough. And I went through the article with just my personal knowledge of the subject, and I reworded a lot of stuff. I basically kind of rewrote the whole thing, rewording a lot of things, taking a couple things out that were inaccurate, and adding a lot. And I took about 1,010 word blog post and turned it into about a 1,700 word blog post. Not just because the length matters, but because now it's a complete resource with recommendations of exactly which products to use to do the thing that I'm teaching. So sometimes it's going to look like doing more research, providing better recommendations to people. As we do the research, can we add some data, some statistics? Can we add some kind of scholarly information, etc.? But also just what is the resource I need? And so I'll try to provide some examples of that on the YouTube channel and definitely inside Project 24 as time goes on. But it just kind of varies so much from article to article. The next question from Project 24, I am going to take your guys' questions from here as well, but we got a few here in Project 24. This one is about how to level up outsourced content. When we outsource content, we always take a bit of a hit to quality. It's just never going to be the same. There are some cases when you can get someone who does have expertise in that niche to be able to write high quality content. But it's usually not going to be of the same quality of what you're going to expect. One, it's not their website, it's yours. It's your business. And so you care about it more than anybody else. So anyway, that's number 1. Number 2 is most people who are writing for a writing service don't have the level of expertise that you would like them to have. So when we want to level up that content, really, the question here actually includes some examples here, but what I find is a lot of the time the content writers, when they write, even just the wording they use feels like a blogger, not like a helpful person who's just trying to give me good information. I don't know how to better describe that other than to provide some examples, and I want to make sure I get to more questions. So I am going to kind of change the voice a little bit and try to encourage my writers to look at the articles that I have reworked and try to match that a little bit. And I think if we do that, they're going to realize that I don't want sort of that bloggy voice. I want something that feels real. And I want specifics. And so providing better feedback and better instruction, I think, is going to help a lot. Adding additional research, adding data, adding scholarly content, and again, encouraging them to do the same. With our writers, we do have a mandatory sort of research period, and we often will provide them with specific ideas for independent actual research before they actually write the article. So those kinds of things help as well. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and take a couple of questions here from the community. Casta Allen is asking about making a video about how to sell a website. And I do actually think that's a good topic, so I'm going to add that to my list. How to sell a website is, I mean, it kind of depends on the size of the website. But there are some really, really good options here. I just talked to a guy. I was interviewed for a podcast the other day. Domain Magnate is the name of the podcast and their website. And they buy big websites and have sort of a... it's like a fund, so right, so people invest and they own shares in their business that owns and manages large websites. It's pretty cool. If you have a smaller site, then there's a few different cool options, so it's a good one. And then another one I'm going to take: what word count feels too much even for a pillar post? There's not a specific word count, but I do think that, you know, if you're getting above the 3,500 to 4,000 words, in most cases, that one article is probably getting to be much more than anybody's going to sit down and read. But it depends a little bit on what that resource is. So in some cases, people are going to only want a portion of that. And so if you do a good job of making your article very scannable, using good subheadings, breaking it up often, I don't mind an article being very long. So it just kind of depends on what the purpose of that resource is. If it's an article that you expect someone to sit down and read to learn the whole thing, break it up into smaller chunks, I think. We don't normally do like a series of articles, but I think that there are plenty of cases where breaking the topic down into smaller chunks, interlinking, not necessarily, okay, now for the next chunk of the article, go here. It's more like, let's break the topic into smaller subtopics to write. There you go. And yes, Susie, you can ask an SEO question. You're welcome to do that. I'll try to get back to here. I got a couple of more from Project 24 I want to do as well. Okay, this one's a fun one. Do I personally, or others on the Income School team, use any SEO tools like Ahrefs, SEMrush, etc.? Which do we use and why? For me, it actually does vary a little bit. So, and then he asks as well, what data is reliable, which metrics are maybe less reliable. Search volume data is always questionable, especially because a lot of us in the blogging space, niche websites, etc., are looking for kind of long tail keywords. Well, by very definition, long tail keywords have fairly low search volume. They're the kind of fringe topics, right, that other people aren't writing about. Well, the lower the search volume, the less represented or the more inaccurately represented those searches are going to be in a survey, in a subset of all of the search data on the web. So it's the law of large numbers and small numbers in statistics. If you take a sample, those things that are more along the fringes are going to statistically be much more over or underrepresented. And because of that, we often write articles on, quote, zero search volume topics that end up driving plenty of traffic to our websites. So I don't trust that data. However, many of these tools have some really neat features. Ahrefs has some good ones. In terms of a paid tool, I think that's my favorite. There you go. I'm telling you. I think that's my favorite in terms of a paid tool. However, for most bloggers, until you're actually really making money from your blog, paying like $100 a month for Ahrefs is unnecessary. And it's an expense that, I mean, it could stop you from proceeding, right? So there are a lot of free options out there. If you're looking for ideas of just topics, keywords, quote, there are tons of options that are totally free. Answer the Public is a good one still. You can go in there, you can just type in a word maybe it's the main sort of topic of your site, but maybe break it down and it's a subtopic somewhere on, further down. If we had camper report, I could type in camper, right? I could, but I could also go much further niche down and I could say generator for camper, and I could type that in and just see what I get. And I'm going to get a list of things that people actually search on the web related to with those words in it. It's not complete. There are all of the tools are going to be kind of like that. They're not going to give you sort of a complete thing. They're going to rely on those specific words. And so from there, we just have to use our brain. Okay. AKV in the YouTube asks, What is the best WordPress theme in 2021? The best. Again, it just depends so much on what your purpose is. I've started using, I've been testing out one called Cadence. It's become really popular. It's also, if you use the full paid everything, it's also fairly expensive, but I do like it. You can use kind of the default Gutenberg editor, but it just adds all these other blocks that allows you to make your site look however you want. But they've managed to make it very light and very fast. And so I can do pretty much anything that I want to do with a website using Cadence. And so for something that you want to be very customizable, I like Cadence. I still like Divi. They are doing a lot of work to speed up websites. But again, for customization, I've come to know it really well, and it's really cool. It doesn't use Gutenberg's block editor. They have their own page builder. But again, they're doing some work to speed up the page loads. But there are some other great themes out there that are very light, very fast. Obviously, I'm going to pitch Acabado. Acabado is a good theme if you are not super tech savvy. You just want to get your website set up. You don't want to have to fool with like building a custom page and filling it in with all sorts of stuff. You just want to get up and going. So it kind of depends a little bit on what you're going for. Okay, I'm going to come back to the YouTube in just a minute. I'm going to go back to Project 24. So here it says they want to know if we've done any recent examples, tests, if we have any data with siloing, topic clustering, and then as well as how do we manage interlinking when we have a lot of outsourced content. I haven't done a specific like case study using specifically just the siloing structure or the kind of the topic cluster structure. That is something I'm actually working on now. And so I will have some good data and some good examples for you, hopefully in the not too distant future. But it does take time, obviously, to build up sites that are following anything regimented. I have been doing a lot of studying up on what other people are teaching in these spaces. And I do have some hypotheses that I want to test out. And it's essentially in the end, that's going to impact the way that we do search analysis. Things that we find that work better, we're going to incorporate into what we teach. And so that's something that I'm really taking very seriously right now. And then how do we manage interlinking with a lot of outsourced content? It is tough, especially if you're getting content in very quickly. If you go order like 50 or 100 articles, how do you now manage interlinking? And I think the thing that helps me the most is structuring my website, knowing kind of, these are my categories and my subcategories. Here's how each topic fits into it. They're all listed out on a spreadsheet by category. I can group them together. And then within each category, I might internally, even if I never put these on the site, like as categories or subcategories, I might internally have subcategories where I can group articles by 5 or 10 that are really highly relevant to each other. Then I go through those articles one by one, and, as a group, right? And then add those links to the others within that cluster that sort of makes sense. So I think that's the approach that I'll take to it. It does mean going in and doing extra work after the articles have already been written. The next one, again, from Project 24, if we want to take a site from 4,000 a month to 40,000 a month, what's the game plan? Now, in this case, this is a person who's in a country where selling an info product is tough. Most of the payment processors and stuff just aren't, you can't use them in that country. And so, how do we do this when really we're relying on ads and affiliate? So if we're just relying on ads and affiliate, a couple things I'm going to do. One, obviously more content is going to help, but only to a point. Unless we're actually broadening the niche and covering even more and more and more ground, if we just write more articles, but kind of stay within the same niche, at some point, each article adds less and less value to the niche. And so you do sort of hit a plateau if we're not careful there, and we don't plan for that. And so just adding more content isn't the only answer. I would definitely be trying to optimize ads and affiliate. 90% of this person's traffic or revenue, they say, comes from ads, and only 10% from affiliate. We need to look for some more affiliate opportunities here. And we need to work on optimizing those opportunities. With ads, what's your EPMV? If it's, $10, how do we work on getting that up to $40? Do we implement some video ads? Do we start to morph our content to be a little bit more just high value content for advertisers, etc. The problem with relying on only one or two sources of income is, I have another question here actually asking about my thoughts about, some of the privacy, Google's changes, the cookies, etc., and how that's going to impact, third-party ads and such. There's a lot of things like that that are totally outside of our control as bloggers. And so if we rely on any one or even two of those things, Amazon cuts commissions by half in your industry and your income gets cut in half. That's it. And so we do need to try to diversify. And so for most people, I'm going to say we need to find another monetization route. Maybe there's a really good affiliate program that we can really partner with, maybe a small business where we can, create an affiliate program and partner with them and just, make a lot of money through one affiliate program. I've seen people do that very effectively because they're more than just a one-off affiliate. They're more like a partner. For most people, I'm going to say an info product is going to be a great idea. Can we, again, within the niche, we just need to figure out what's the right monetization. It could be that you start selling physical products and you use, if, Stripe and stuff don't work in your country, is there something else that you could use? We're just going to have to start getting creative at that point. I see a lot of people getting to those higher five figures numbers, the $30,000 and $40,000 a month. And usually they have a blog, oftentimes a YouTube channel as well. But also in most cases, they have some sort of a course or something of higher value. Oftentimes it's not the totally passive sort of ads-based website. Let's see. Okay, there's one more I want to take here real quick, and then I'll come back to you guys on YouTube. Sorry. The next one is thoughts on Cloudways. I've mentioned in a recent video Cloudways hosting. I really like it so far. I've tried it out. I haven't moved everything over or anything like that. In this case, they're considering moving from WPX, which is one we used to recommend, over to Cloudways. Most of my sites are still on Big Scoots, which I really like. A lot of our small sites are still on Bluehost, which works fine for a little site. But what I'm finding is with Cloudways, you don't have to pay for a year up front like you do on Bluehost. You can start at $10 a month and you can do multiple sites on that. And you're probably not going to have to upgrade anything for a while. With Cloudways, you're going to have a lot more opportunity to scale up and down and just pay for what you need, as opposed to, moving up to a whole new level, or, it just works differently. You can just spin up another server and boom, we got more space and we got more bandwidth. So I do really like that about Cloudways. Should you move from WPX to Cloudways? I find that, WPX, even Big Scoots, if you're on a plan that says, well, you can have up to 10 or 20 websites on this plan, the more websites you put on it and the more bandwidth it starts to use up, it does slow it down. Everybody kind of has their limit. And so on each of those platforms, for you to be able to get more bandwidth, it's okay, now we got to go to the next tier. And so your cost goes from whatever, $30 a month to $100 a month, or from $100 a month to $250 a month. That's doesn't make a ton of sense when on Cloudways, it's okay, let me just move up and I'm just going to buy a little bit more memory, or I'm going to buy another server and you're good. And so I do think it's a really good fit if you're having those scaling issues. So there you go. There's my thoughts on Cloudways. Okay, I'm back to questions from YouTube. Let's see. How many posts do I have to write in a micro niche blog? The number of posts you should write on a website, it's not just about niche, micro niche. We can kind of break things into those classifications, but every niche is a little bit different. So let's say we pick something that's very niche down. It's like a micro niche, and you really do cover everything anybody would need to know in 30 blog posts. That's how many blog posts you should write. That's, you're good. But there may be another quote micro niche where after 30 blog posts, you're actually, the more I write about this and the more I research about it, the more I find there's other spaces, there's other things that people need. There's some adjacent things, or maybe I want to build onto this. And so now you end up with 50 blog posts. And then you realize, oh, you know what? I want to expand outward a little bit because this is working really well. And so I'm going to kind of move up in the niche and and across and spread out a little bit and cover more adjacent topics. And so now, I could write hundreds of blog posts before I'm out. And so I don't really treat a website as like done ever. There's always, you reach a point where it's like, okay, now I'm going to go evaluate my content, see what did well. I'm going to battleship it. I'm going to optimize a bit. Sometimes you'll reach a point where you say, okay, I'm ready to expand. There are times where I say, okay, you know what? I'm done with this website. So I'm going to hold it. I'm going to let it earn some money for a little while, maybe eventually sell it, because now I'm more interested in focusing on something else, maybe a different one. So there you go. I really do appreciate everyone, kind comments. You guys, there's a lot of nice stuff in here. So, okay. Would you recommend having my website on Bing? When you write content and put it on a website, like I don't block any search engine. We get articles ranking on Bing all the time. When we write content, we often do it with Google in mind, because Google's the biggest search engine. But when we write content that's optimized for search, the other search engines tend to pick it up, and oftentimes they pick it up faster. Should you go set up, what does Bing call it? It's like, I think it's just Bing Webmaster Tools, and go, make sure that you're set up in there just like you would in Google Search Console. I think that that's perfectly fine to do. It's not something I do for all of our sites. They rank on Bing just fine without it, just like they've always ranked just fine on Google, even without setting up Google Search Console. Again, we kind of emphasize Google a bit, and we focus on making sure our websites are compatible and compliant with all of Google's requirements. But in doing so, they tend to be very compliant with all the others. You're going to have them on Bing. I guess that's kind of my point. In terms of taking the time to do that, I think it's perfectly fine if you want to do it. But oftentimes it's easy to get hung up doing those things and not focusing and spending your time on doing the things that move the needle the most, which is creating content. So just be careful about that. A Project 24 member asked if I would be doing more website reviews and if they could put theirs forward. For anybody who is interested in having their website reviewed on the channel, or another form of content I'm just starting, I just recorded one the other day, is a specific article review where I looked at a blog post somebody wrote and critiqued that. If you have something like that you'd like to submit, in the description of my videos, I've been including a link to a little feedback form. I have a spot there where you can provide feedback on the channel, request a video, maybe provide an idea for a video, but also for you to be able to submit a specific website or article and provide some information around it. If you want to get something reviewed, make sure that you provide me like enough information around that for it to really be worth my time. It's got to stand out a little bit, because I get quite a few of those. But absolutely, I'm happy to review websites. I think that a lot of people like to see that. I think it's really valuable. Another question about silo structure. What are my thoughts on a silo structure? I'm curious. I want to try some things. People have been siloing for years now, and there's, topic clusters and all that. And there's definitely something to that, to building up enough content on one sort of category, on one sort of cluster of content or one silo, and building up enough content within that specific topic to have some authoritativeness there. I think there's really something to that. And I think we should be, as we do our search analysis, thinking more about kind of how our site is going to be structured and building at least a critical mass of content around each sort of pocket of information. Now, with siloing, a lot of people, what they'll say is you don't interlink between silos ever. They're almost like unique sets of information on each site. I don't really know. I don't quite understand the reasoning why that would be. I get that in general, you want them to link mostly to each other because they support each other so much. But it seems like if within one silo, it would benefit, the reader would benefit from a piece of content that's in another silo it's related, but it's just not the same silo. Why would I not link to that? That doesn't make sense. What I like to do is think from the perspective of a user. Would this be helpful to a user to link to this other piece of content? And Google kind of follows suit. They're getting smarter all the time. The algorithm is. And so I don't think that messes up their authority screen. And, I haven't found that to be an issue. We've built lots and lots of successful websites. Project 24 members have built lots and lots of successful websites with many times very little concern for the structure of the content and what links point to what, etc. It's not necessary, but I do think that there's some value in making sure that we do have a fair amount of content that's all related and that all links to each other. And I think that that does build up authority faster. So those are my thoughts so far. I'm definitely testing and learning because I want to make sure that we incorporate more of that stuff as we find real value in what's being taught. I'm going to take this one from Thomas Delgard Clausen. How's it going being the only one left in charge at Income School? And I really enjoy the content you're putting out, by the way. Thank you. It's actually going really well. I have a really good team here, and it's never at Income School been that any one person has all the ideas. I mean, this isn't me saying anything negative about anybody. It's never been that one person drives everything. It's always been a very collaborative thing. From the beginning, Jim and I working together to make each other's ideas better. And everybody here has different strengths. And so, with Jim gone, we lost some strengths that he has that I don't. However, the reason that works is because the other people here have other complementary strengths, some of them that overlap with Jim's. And so I have a great group of people to bounce ideas off of. I have a great group of people helping me with ideas, and we just work together. You want to see a little behind the scenes. I spend a lot of time with Nate. Any of you guys who are into the YouTube stuff, watching Channel Makers, he's a smart guy, and he's testing all sorts of things. And in the YouTube space. And so when I have questions about how to make better video, how to write better titles for my videos, everything that is here on this YouTube channel, he and I spend a lot of time working together on it. And as he's working through some things for how to teach YouTube better, he comes to me to bounce ideas off of. And so having somebody to work with in that way is extremely beneficial. Likewise, when it comes to anything blogging related and stuff, Nathan and Anna and I are just working together all the time. We've got Andrea over there who's editing video, but really doing all of our creative stuff, who just is fantastic. So it's actually going really well. I will say it's been very busy, just kind of ticking that on, but it's kind of always been busy here. So I'm kind of working on kind of how to make that a little bit more sustainable. But thanks for the question. Let's see. I am going to take another question from Project 24 real quick. This is one about, they're in Google Search Console looking at their crawl statistics and settings, and they notice that they have some 404 errors. And when they look at it, it's because there's some media URLs, images that they replaced. And so they deleted the old one and put a new image there. Well, Google had previously crawled all those URLs, indexed them, and so now Google looks at those and says, hey, there's 404 errors there. So they're asking, what should they do about it? Technically, the best thing to do when you get rid of one URL is to create a redirect. Now, if that's not something that you know how to do, if it's not something that you would think to do, or if it's going to take a lot of time, it's not good to have a lot of broken links, absolutely. But it's another one of those places where it's like, how important is this for SEO? Is it one of those things where it's like an SEO best practice? Yeah. So, but is it one of those things that really makes an impact? Not really. It's not, how much is it going to hurt your other content on the website that an image link that you used to have is no longer there? Google will de-index that over time and you're good. Your sitemap, I mean, how many people were entering the site through that URL, right? Through a search that led them to that image. Now, if you have a site that's like very heavy in image search and that's part of like what you rank, then it becomes more important. But for most of us, that's not the case. One way to get around that is to just not have your media URLs indexed. Acrobato now has that setting. There's just a checkbox where you can have the, any media URL attachments just redirect to the content. And so that's, I think that's a better approach. If you're not in Acrobato, that's fine. SEO plugins are going to be able to do that, a Rank Math or a Yoast or something like that. Have that option. If you're not trying to specifically rank in image search, then why have those images, those image URLs crawled and indexed? And so it's actually going to be better for indexing on your site if you not have those indexed. Another one here, an example of second stage search analysis. So, how does that change to find the next pocket of topics that are maybe a little bit more competitive? For me, the search analysis process looks very similar. It's pretty much the same as the first time through it, which is, I'm just looking for topics. As we do our competition analysis, as we try to estimate, what the search volume is likely to be, etc. Now I'm just going to be able to pick up more of those that have competition and actually write them. So really, it's less about, in the search analysis, it's less about the finding of the ideas that changes. It's more that as the competition's higher, I don't treat it as extreme competition. I don't treat it as very hard. I treat it more as like, oh, this is doable for me. And so that might impact the way that you rate it. And so therefore it'll impact sort of, the output that the search analysis tool gives you, which is telling you what your highest and lowest priority articles are to write. So really, I'm just more likely to write the articles now that I wouldn't have been likely to write before. The other thing that it's going to impact is when I am looking for ideas, if I find that there are certain, silos or categories or whatever that are working really well on my site, then I'm going to potentially look for some more there. If I find that there's maybe some adjacent areas that I haven't branched out to, but some articles that kind of touch on those things are working better than maybe some of my other main content, well, now I'm going to do search analysis more in that phase. So I'll give you an example. On Patent Rebel, and we have a YouTube video coming out soon talking about this in more detail. But on Patent Rebel, we found that we're ranking really well for a lot of search terms around patents, and the search volume just seems to be pretty low because the traffic isn't very high. But there's some articles that touch on other forms of intellectual property that are doing fairly well, even though that's not even what they were written for. They're bringing in a fair amount of traffic, even though they don't rank for those specific search terms in that other type of intellectual property. And it's the other types of intellectual property are used by way more people, and so probably searched way more often. So why would we not expand in those directions? And so as we do search analysis in this case, I'm going to start pushing in that direction. So it's going to change maybe some of the search terms that I start with as I look for more and more ideas. The next one here, and I think this is another important one. If you're blogging, but you want to be able to spend time with your family, like you're blogging now so that when you go full time, you'll have tons of time with your family, right? How do you find the balance to live that dream today, even though you're working extra hard? Most of us that are blogging, until you're making enough to like quit your job, you're doing the blogging and a job. It's a lot to do. And so how do you find that balance? And I think each person kind of needs to figure out what works for them. I find that oftentimes quality time with my family is more important than quantity time. That really is key. If I spend 10 minutes with one of my kids one-on-one on the thing that they care about, talking to them and mostly listening to them, and when they say, hey, I want to learn how to do this, and I say, okay, we're going to do that. My son wants to learn more about, he wants to use a pocket knife and whittle and learn how to carve and stuff. And I'm like, well, I got to spend some time like teaching you how to safely use a pocket knife. Well, when can we do that, Dad? Well, you know what? Let's put it on the calendar for Saturday. It's on my calendar. It's going to happen. And we're going to spend an hour maybe. But if I hadn't put on my calendar, it wasn't going to happen. And as it is, tomorrow I'm going to be spending an hour or so with my son, teaching him how to safely use a pocket knife so he can whittle, and kind of setting the rules and et cetera. And I think that's kind of how it needs to be. Sometimes we need to schedule things. Sometimes we just need to kind of set the expectation. You know what? When I was in business school and starting blogging and working a full-time job, that's how I got home from work every day. And by the way, at the time I was training for a half marathon, so I was running for like an hour a day. And it was just normal. Like dad comes home from work and goes running for an hour. He gets home, we have dinner. And then I have whatever, a certain amount of time with my family that was very intensely focused family time. And then it was, okay, well, now dad's got to go to class. And then once class is over and most people are going to bed, he's going to write a blog post. That was my life for a while. But it worked because I was able to, when I was with family, focus on family. I think today it's actually a little harder for me because the work that I do, I enjoy it enough that when I am home, it's hard to shut it off in my mind. And so I think that's the key, is focused time for family. Okay. It's funny, the chat, it jumps so fast that sometimes I can't even read a question before it's gone. So there's a lot of questions in here about specific niches and whether or not they're too broad or etc. So here's one, like, is homemaking / decluttering too broad or too popular? All of homemaking and decluttering, it might be kind of big for a blog, but I wouldn't steer away necessarily from choosing a domain name that's kind of along those lines, but then starting with just maybe 2 or 3 categories of content. So decluttering kind of is one category, and maybe even starting even more specifically. So decluttering may be a category on your site, but under decluttering, it might be that I literally just focus on decluttering kids' bedrooms. I might focus a little bit on, maybe I'm also so I'm going to do kids' bedrooms. I'm going to do decluttering the garage / just home storage. I might pick one that's in a different category altogether. That's just maybe around, meal planning for families. It's something like that. Now, is it too popular? There is a lot of content around each of those things. And so what you're going to have to do is start doing some search analysis and just try to find some spaces where, not that nobody's written about, but that the competition that's actually ranking doesn't look very high. What that often means is, like, if somebody's asking a question around decluttering and you're finding that the only search results are forums, that's often a good sign. Forums are a really good search result when the search intent is like, I want 100 people's opinion about this. But when it's like, I want someone to teach me how to do this thing, then a forum isn't very good. And so, just consider that and try to find, if you can find just a few little cracks where there's just not very helpful information yet, that's a really good sign. And to me, that means I'm really good to go. I'm going to be able to find a lot more if I just keep looking. So, and I think that goes for really like any of these things, any of these niches, we just have to do some analysis and figure out, even if the main niche that I want to go after does seem either really broad or really competitive, can I start with a subset of that content with a specific category within it? And then over time, maybe I can expand out and become more of an authority in the broader space. Talking about affiliate networks for physical products, there are a lot of good affiliate networks. AvantLink is a good one for physical products. ShareASale has a lot of physical products. A lot of stores that your regular retails, your Walmarts, your Lowe's, a lot of them are on Impact. So there's just multiple networks. I think those 3 are 3 pretty big ones that I would go after for physical products. I think a lot of the brands that you're used to that have an affiliate program are going to find themselves in those networks. Something I heard somebody say the other day that I totally agree with is, we're reaching a point where the network matters a lot less than the program, the actual store, the actual brand. If somebody wants to be an affiliate for a specific product, they're just going to find wherever it's being sold. By the way, there's some that are a little bit more industry specific that are really good. I know some of the top affiliates out there outside of Amazon, which is also just, the top affiliate network. But outside of Amazon, there's some big ones. If you're in the electronic space, Best Buy has a pretty good program. It's not that it pays a lot more, than Amazon or anything like that, but it's one of the top programs outside of Amazon, especially in that space. B&H Photo, for if you're doing any sort of like camera, photography, videography gear, is a good program. They sell a lot of good products online, and anybody that's in that space is familiar with buying products from there. And so the other thing that I find to be really effective oftentimes is to provide links to multiple stores if it's being sold in multiple places. So I might have a link to Amazon and another link to B&H Photo for the same product. And I would just specify this one's on Amazon, this one's on B&H Photo, especially if you're doing like a product review. So you do have like a button, like go check out the price. I'm going to have one for Amazon and one for B&H Photo right beside it. Amazon tends to convert better, but a lot of the other programs have a little bit higher payouts. Let's see, I'm back into the Project 24 community. I'm not going to be able to get to all the questions even in there. And so some of these I think are nice big topics for full videos, but also I'm going to try to address them in other ways as well. My thoughts on the changes being brought about by Google, cookies, etc., and how does that impact our websites with ads on them? There's a lot of privacy stuff going on. Apple with giving users the choice to whether or not they want to allow apps to track their activity across other apps. I think that's great. I think people should have control over their privacy. However, it means advertisers have less data about specific users. Is that going to impact ad values? To some extent, yes. I think that what we're going to see is maybe as more and more users do kind of hide their personal information and don't agree to be tracked. By the way, a lot of people still just agree to be tracked for convenience sake. And so whether it's in iOS or whether it's on Google, they're still kind of allowing that. They're choosing to allow that for convenience sake. But as more and more we see privacy being an issue, I think what we're going to see is advertisers who are focused more on paying for high quality ads in very relevant sites. So it'll be less, I think it'll be less about the individual user and a little bit more about which sites are the best fit. And so if we build content that's really advertiser friendly, if we pick niches where there are, high value things that people pay for. So like, there may be some niches where the products that you might recommend as an affiliate aren't that expensive, but there are services that companies offer in that niche that you couldn't be an affiliate for, but that are high value enough that they pay a lot to advertise for. There's probably plenty. I'm thinking about like health and beauty, right? Like makeup and stuff can cost quite a bit, but think about all of the procedures that people go to have done that are expensive, and people wanting to advertise for those. So I would think maybe that direction. It's an example of something that's not totally in our control, so we just have to do the best we can. This one here is about EAT. Is it okay to have some blog posts where there's no author at all? Now, I don't usually have a byline in my blog post. It won't say like, here's the title, and then by so-and-so published on this date. I often remove that data, mostly because my content is usually fairly evergreen. And so I don't necessarily want the user to be like, oh, this is a 5-year-old blog post. I'd rather it just didn't say. You can also just either use a plugin, or this is built into Akabato as well, where you can have the most recently modified, when the post was most recently modified. That can be the date that shows up. But we still have the author box at the bottom. And I think that's generally a good thing. I think it's important in a lot of niches that there's an author, because it's going to play into the EAT, the authoritativeness, not just of the site, but the author matters for getting your content to rank, especially in competitive and very important niches where accuracy of content is important. However, there are a lot of niches, like a lot that are in hobby spaces and stuff, where the writer doesn't really matter, and I think you could get away with that. Now, I don't see anything wrong with using a pseudonym. Oftentimes I'm happy with my face being the face of a site, or just, taking pictures that are obviously like real, like pictures taken by the real person, but not necessarily showing their face. On an about page, if I had a boating website and I took a picture of my boat on the lake, and it wasn't like a super professional looking photo that people might think was a stock photo, and the same boat shows up over and over on the site, and then I just say, hey guys, this is Jack. That's the name that I go by, and that happens to be my middle name, or whatever, or I just choose a different name altogether. It's a pseudonym, but it's still based in it's still based in truth. It's still based in fact. That's my preferred way to go about it. But again, there are a lot of niches where maybe it just doesn't matter. And then a follow-up question from another user on the same topic of EAT is, if I'm making 2 websites and I have an about page on each one and it's me on both sites, should the about pages be the same, or is that duplicate content? Does that matter? Duplicate content is something that bloggers worry about way more than we should. Duplicate content is not usually penalized by Google. Oftentimes, a site that scrapes other people's sites ends up ranking just as well, sometimes outranking the original site, which is very frustrating to me, by the way. And so, is Google penalizing people for duplicate content? No, not as much as maybe they should. Also, duplicate content is more of a problem when it's in the substantive content within an article or, on a website. Your about page is not that substantive. It's not the main content of the website. And so having the same about info show up in multiple places, or even a few paragraphs be the same, that's not going to hurt the SEO of your websites. Now, if the 2 websites are not in like very, very similar niches, like within the same industry, I definitely would tailor each one to the topic of the website. I may not reference my MBA on a site about pressure washers. It's just not important. I may not reference, there's a lot of things like on the about page on Income School that I wouldn't need to put on a pressure washer website. And so I'm going to make the about page content relevant to that particular website. Okay. Oh, I was about to answer your question, Benno. All right. A little bit upset that I didn't answer his question. David Update says, you guys mentioned that adding more articles doesn't work as well as it used to. Can you elaborate on that? I don't think it's that it doesn't work as well as it used to. I think it's more like at some point you've written so much content on your website that the new articles are almost competing with some of the other articles for the same searches. On Camper Report, for example, the first 100 articles did really well. And then we had our writers write a whole bunch of other content that was maybe a little bit more specific, almost niching down a little bit. And we realized that they weren't expanding enough into different enough searches that really what happened was Google could take their pick. Which of these 5 articles do you want to show for this particular search query? So only one of those articles gets the benefit from that search, when for a lot of bloggers, they've only written 1 article that is even relevant to that search. And so we've written 5 articles and we've really guaranteed a good spot on that SERP. Fantastic. But it took 5 articles. We don't get very much benefit for the additional 4 as long as the first one was good. And so having 300 articles on that site versus 100 articles did very little. However, if we had branched out and covered different topics, rather than kind of hammering on more specific aspects of the same topics, we probably would have done better. Had we battleshipped some of that original content that didn't do as well and figured out how to improve upon it, that probably would have been more helpful than just adding 200 more blog posts to the website. That's kind of what I mean there. So, at some point, your site's going to plateau unless you're able to expand to really rank for just a lot more search queries. And I'll give another kind of example of this. If we wrote an article right now that could potentially rank for 5 search queries, and it does. It ranks number 1 for the main one, and it ranks number 3 for most of the others on average, let's say. Well, now I go write a specific article for each of those other search queries. Well, great. Now I've written 5 more articles that basically just take me from number 3 to number 1 on those other search queries. It increased my traffic, but not that much because the first article was already ranking for a wide range of search queries because it was a more thorough article. So if you ever find yourself kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel when you're looking for ideas, then it's either time to expand the niche, broaden, maybe move up a little bit. Well, I keep saying move up, move down and stuff. We've got some YouTube videos coming out soon that talk a little bit about that sort of structuring that we're talking about. And I think that'll clarify that a little bit. But you'll reach a point where it's time to broaden or to kind of move into an adjacent space. Otherwise, the expansion, the additional content just doesn't do that much for you. Okay, let's see. The question, should I flush my website and create a new one? I get that a lot. People are just like, oh, I've put so much into this and maybe it's time to move on. Every single time, that's just going to be kind of a personal question. I think there is a lot of the feeling that I don't want to throw away something I put so much work into. And so it's a sunk cost trap that we fall into. It's a mental trap where it's like, I put a lot into this. I can't just throw it away. I'm sure I can make it work. On the other hand, a lot of times people give up on a site way too early before they've really given it a chance. If you've written a bunch of content and you've learned everything you can learn, you know that the articles are written really well, they're even potentially ranking well, but there's just no traffic coming in. Okay, it's probably, and you've given yourself, plenty of time. They are ranking well. It's just not getting the traffic. Then, okay, yeah, maybe it is time to pick a different niche or to at least expand into something adjacent, broaden it out a little bit, or just move over. On the other hand, if you have written and your content's really good, but the competition is so high, you can't get anything to rank at all. Again, there's an option to either kind of pivot or to just say, hey, this niche, it's not working for me. I need to go start with something easier. Maybe I can come back to this niche that I'm passionate about someday, but not until I'm a lot better at this and I know it works. So there are times when it makes more sense to give up. I just think that giving up before you've really given it a chance, you've given your content long enough to rank, and you've verified, kind of what the traffic potential is, because you do have some ranking content. I think most people just give up too early. Let's see. I'll take another one here from Project 24. Okay, this is a question I get a lot. It's a 9-month-old website. They're starting to get a lot of organic backlinks, but quite a few of them look pretty spammy. Should they be worried? Should they do anything about it? Should they disavow them? I think most of the time, it's not something I worry about. Most backlinks that show up on any of our sites look fairly spammy. Some look really good. A lot of them are just kind of mediocre. And then there's always like this flood of kind of spam comments. I don't worry too much about them unless it does seem to start impacting my SEO. So if you're in Search Console and you're seeing like some really sketchy looking sites, things, adult websites, that kind of thing, where there's a lot of links coming from that could be someone trying to actively harm your site. That doesn't happen to most of us. The negative SEO where people try to build links from, really questionable sites to make your SEO worse. It's just, I think Google's getting a lot better at identifying that sort of behavior, but we also just don't see it happening that often. And so most of the time I don't worry about it unless it starts to really become an issue. Most sites, their backlink profile's not going to look, only high quality sites backlink to me. That's just not usually how it looks. All right, I'm going to come back here to you guys. Okay. Caesar94 USC says, hey, Ricky, I got rejected by Ezoic saying my content is automatic generated. Do you have any advice? Yeah, one is I would take a look at the content and is it actually auto-generated? Does it look auto-generated? Whenever you get rejected by like an advertiser or something like that, it's always like hard to take that and be like, well, no, it's not auto-generated. Or my content isn't spun content, or I mean, they'll often reject sites because they say, well, the content looks scraped. It looks similar to other things that are out there. Really, what's going on with Ezoic is they start with Google standards. So if you wouldn't get accepted by like AdSense, you're probably not going to get accepted by them. Now, that doesn't mean if you've been, let's say like if AdSense has blacklisted you, that doesn't mean you can't get on Ezoic. But the way it works is the first ad network you can get on at Ezoic is Google Ad Exchange. It's different from AdSense. So if you've ever been blacklisted by AdSense, it doesn't mean you can't get on Google Ad Exchange. You may be able to do that. But again, just like, don't screw up. Make sure you do everything right this time, because those like bans from Google are often for life. So don't mess up. And so don't look at it that way, but rather when you look at Google's advertising policies, make sure your site like fits all that. Make sure you are creating original high quality content. And if you are, it could just be that, you know, they review a lot of sites and they looked at it quickly and they got it wrong. And so, you know, what you can also do is try to reach out, reply to them, submit a ticket, something like that. And just try to find out. I know a lot of times they won't give specific reasons, but maybe replying and saying, hey, you know, I work really hard on creating original content. I'm sure they hear that kind of stuff all the time too from people. And I'm having a hard time understanding like what of my content makes you think that. You know, like a lot of big companies, they get a lot of garbage. I'm sure they get so many sites every single day that are not the quality sites you guys are trying to build that are applying. And so as they're kind of shuffling through all that, just know that it's not uncommon that there's going to be a mistake made. Also, I do find that if somebody gets rejected by Ezoic, there's a pretty good chance that even as their site gets bigger, they're not going to get accepted by like a Mediavine or an AdThrive or one of those bigger not bigger companies, but rather those networks that even have higher standards for what they'll allow in. So I would just work on the content and make sure the site looks good and looks really presentable, really advertiser friendly. There's some questions here about sharing your content on like Medium or LinkedIn, etc. Is that a duplicate content issue? Is it a good practice, a bad practice? I think it's okay. Just know that if you, sharing it or like even posting it on LinkedIn in the archives and stuff, I think that's fine. I would link to the original article. Just have like a sentence that says this article originally posted on, and then your website. Like on Medium or something, the downside of that is it could end up outranking you there. And so instead of getting the traffic to your site, it's getting the traffic to Medium. I generally don't. I generally just like try to build up my own authoritativeness on my own site over time and get the traffic directly. However, it is a place that you can maybe start to get noticed. And so if you do have a few pieces of content, I might even create like original content for Medium and use that to interlink to similar or adjacent content on my own site. That way, you know, I'm not competing with myself in the rankings, but I am getting that notice. And when I link back to the original site, I'm linking them to a piece of content that adds additional benefit, as opposed to, oh, here's the same article you're reading here, but you can go read it on my site too, if that makes sense. I think that's probably the way I would go about it. Oh, wow, so many. Let's see. Can you talk about how to combine small topics into longer blog posts? You know what? I'm going to take this question. I'm like out of time, but let's see. I'm going to take that question and another one here in Project 24, and then one more question from YouTube. What was the question? Oh, combining smaller topics into longer blog posts. So here's the way I look at it. I do want every blog post to have at least kind of one primary search query that it's written for. But that doesn't mean that it won't rank. It can't rank for other search queries or cover kind of multiple small topics, as long as those small topics are extremely relevant to each other. So I'll give you an example. I was writing a blog post about using a pressure washer, but using like water like from a lake or something, so it's not pressurized water. That's going to be a how-to blog post about how to do it, but also I'm going to answer the question, can you do it? I'm also, going to answer numerous questions about just like, filtering water that goes into your pressure washer. There's a lot of kind of questions being answered that it could potentially rank for, but primarily it's ranking for either can you use lake water in a pressure washer, or how do you use lake water in a pressure washer? I hope that makes sense. So really it's kind of one topic, but it's written in a way that various questions surrounding that will all be answered within the blog post, and they'll be answered in a very succinct way to where I could even potentially win the snippet for multiple things. Now, would I take like multiple topics around pressure washers, like can you pressure washer, or can you use lake water in a pressure washer? Can you use pond water in a pressure washer? How to use a pressure washer with a generator? Would I take lots of queries that are similar, but maybe a little bit further off the mark and combine them into one long blog post? I think at some point it starts to get too unfocused. And so I would just be careful with that. I do like answering multiple search queries, but I really only want the article to be on really one topic. I hope that makes sense. Another one here from Project 24. Thoughts on creating a separate site versus one large site. So they have an idea on their site for one kind of cluster or one category that really could be its own site and might do a little better if it was on its own. What do you think? Most of the time, I find it's a lot easier once I have an established site that's got some credibility to add an additional piece of, branch of content onto that one site. There may be some value into having your entire site be on that more focused, smaller topic. From just an EAT standpoint, on this site, I'm really an authority in this one thing. This is what we focus on. But I think you can have similar authoritativeness within that topic cluster or within that, silo of content on the bigger site. Think about, WebMD, where they have their authorities on like every disease, you can absolutely do that. And I find it's easier and faster to get that new sort of silo of content to rank on a site that's already established. This is another way where I'm just like, I don't totally silo things off from each other, because it's like, man, if I have something that's closely related, why wouldn't I link from an established successful piece of content to get people over to the new content and the new category more quickly and get it to rank faster and potentially rank better and get more traffic? Like, why wouldn't I do that? Anyway, that's again, my thought around that. I know there are reasons why people think that's a great idea, and maybe it is, but it's not one that's been proven out to me well enough yet. Anyway, so in my case, most of the time it's going to be, if it's closely related to the main topic of my original site, like, I'm just going to keep it on the same site. Okay. Let's see, back in here. And Gaurav asking about silo, yay or nay. I don't know. The jury for me is a little bit still out on siloing. I do like the idea of having a good amount of content in any particular category or on any particular subtopic for the website, sub niche within the site. But whether or not I want to totally silo, I'm not totally sold on that. Should I update the Google Search Console sitemap after I add a new category to my site? Well, probably not a bad idea. I found that sometimes it will take Google months. I was in there recently and I was like, you last looked at my sitemap like 6 months ago. My content was still getting crawled. The new stuff was, but still, like, they said, oh, we haven't looked at this thing in like 6 months. So I just went ahead and I updated it real quick. It took me like 5 seconds, and now they have the new one and they're looking at that. So maybe not a bad idea. Okay. I said I was going to take one more here. Let's see. I'm going to pick a good one here. All right. Some good tips. This one I think has been asked a couple times throughout here, so I'm going to go ahead and take it. I'd love to answer all your guys' questions, so I'm sorry for any that I didn't get to. What are some good tips for information-based blogs? No, I would consider most of our blogs information-based, but in this case, they're talking things like politics or history. Something that's maybe just, it's not like a hobby, etc. You know, I think the difficulty with like history is we have to figure out what people are actually searching. So for a history-based blog, you know, who's our target audience? Are we writing this blog for people doing reports and projects in high school and maybe college? I think those are a lot of the primary searches that you're going to get for people searching about history. And so if history is my thing, it's the thing I love, then I would want to make sure that I'm writing articles that are highly relevant to today and that are based upon searches people are making today. And that is, I think, where there's kind of a stretch. I think it's kind of tough to do. I do think that there's a lot of purpose for it, and there's a lot of value in that content. I think it needs to be out there. We just need to find a better way to market that content by using Google. And so we have to do that by putting ourselves in the mindset of who our target audience is. Who do you want to reach and what are they searching for? If you can do that and then point it from there to history, I think you're fine. Politics, that one, I mean, there's always highly relevant current information, especially news-related information. And I think could you take sort of some of the headlines of today, some of the things people are searching about, and then use that to point them toward more political theory or more, et cetera. I think you could do that. Just know that you're competing with news sites in the politics space. And I think that's maybe the difficulty there. And so if you want to do more of a deep dive on some topics that the news sites cover superficially, maybe there's some potential there. But just know, like, we have to come back to that question. What are people searching for? Who's my target audience? Who do I think would want to read my content if they found it? And then what are they looking for on the web? I actually think that in a lot of cases, if we're providing information and want to provide it in and we're good at providing it like in a interesting way that's highly relevant to today, if it's not very search related, you're going to do better on YouTube than in a blog. The blog is a great supplement to YouTube, but YouTube is where people find content that's just interesting and they want to watch it and learn. I watch stuff on YouTube that I didn't search for it. It's just related to things that I have watched before on YouTube. And I end up following people for a while. Like I'll go through a phase where I'm just watching someone's videos over and over and over, like not the same video over and over, but watching their videos as they come out because I find it's relevant information to me, but it's not something I would go to search for. And so I think that's a real benefit that we have on YouTube. Somebody asked earlier, do we do YouTube SEO? YouTube is a different animal. There is some YouTube like SEO, like using YouTube to rank on Google and in the SERPs, and actually have a YouTube video coming out about that fairly soon. But really, YouTube has its own algorithm and it behaves very differently. And we do actually learn and teach a lot about that in Project 24. I don't talk about it as much on this channel, YouTube channel, mostly because that's not what most of you came for. And so instead, Nate talks about it over on Channel Makers, and that guy is spending all of his time learning how to do YouTube. There are a few other questions asked in the Project 24 community that I wasn't able to get to. I will try to cover them maybe in one of our podcasts or in a future video or something like that. So thanks to all of you who participated and submitted questions. And all of you here on YouTube who submitted your own questions, thank you for participating. I do love doing this, and I'm going to try to do it more often, probably at least once or twice a month. And I think Nathan's actually really excited to jump in here and participate. We'll get more of the team on here on some of these YouTube lives. So thank you all for participating today. Thanks for being here. And if you didn't catch all of it or missed things, there will be a replay. I'm going to do my best to timestamp it. It takes a while to go through and timestamp each of the questions, but I know it adds a lot of value. So I'll try to make that easier for you as well. So again, thank you all for being here, and we'll see you guys next time.